So how we collect our data from our sample, how we get a sample is a very important thing, and there's a lot of different methods available. One method is to just go to try to talk to everybody, which is what we attempt to do with the census. So whenever you try to talk to everyone in the population, rather than go out and get a sample, it's called a census. So the US Census does this, and there are definitely some drawbacks or limitations to the census. So as always, take a moment. I want you, if you can, pause, think about what might be some drawbacks to the census. And I'm going to give you what students usually say. So students usually talk about how people lie, right? Some people may lie intentionally, some people may not know the information, may fill it out incorrectly without actually doing that on purpose, but you're going to get bad information, whether it's people who just don't want the government to have the right information or what it might be. There's going to be misinformation on the census. We also have that it's truly a snapshot, right? There's people dying, births and deaths kind of make it immediately inaccurate, right? In terms of this snapshot of what's going on in the US. I'm trying to think what else students say. One thing I really hope students would say is, it usually takes a little bit, is how is the census done, right? It's mailed out to everyone's home. You send it back. If you don't send it back, they send a census taker to your house who then asks you the same questions. And the biggest issue, I think, with the census, besides the fact that we have births and deaths and people lie, is that the homeless population is left out. We're taking this snapshot of the US and leaving out an entire population. If you don't have a permanent mailing address at which to send the census, you are not counted in the census, right? You are not somebody we know about. So we're leaving out an entire population of people. And another really big issue with the census is that it takes a ton of money and a ton of time. This is why it's only done every 10 years. It's a very costly endeavor. So if we could do a pretty good job of figuring out what's going on with the population by using a sample, we could save ourselves a lot of time and money. We know our data is not going to be perfect, but think about it this way. We already know that the census isn't perfect, right? We're leaving out entire populations. It's a snapshot. People are going to be born and die every minute of every day, and people are giving us misinformation. So why spend all this money and time on something that's going to be inaccurate when we can get something that we know is going to be inaccurate but might do as good a job at sort of estimating what's going on? So that's what we're talking about with sampling. So in terms of a good sample, what we're really hoping for is something that is representative of the population. In order for my sample to be good, it should look like the population I pulled it from. The census is not really a good example because it doesn't look like the population. We left out that little group. So how do we actually do this? Selecting a sample from your population sometimes has an interim step, especially if your population is the US, right? Or even that Alabama state race, right? If you're thinking about that Alabama state race, let's just do that as an example off to the side. What our population is all Alabama voters, right? Anybody who's going to vote in that special election. Now, there's not just a list of every voter who's eligible to vote in the special election. So usually what we need to go out and do is get a sampling frame. And hopefully our sampling frame is a subset of our population. That's not always true, which is shown in this little like Venn diagram-y drawing here, is sometimes our sampling frame will include people who don't fall into our population, but hopefully it does. So we'll have our sampling frame. One of the polls, not the one we looked at, the America, whatever that one was, I don't remember what it was called, like America First or something terrible. No, I already closed it. There was one of the polls in the article, though, where they just used landlines. So they went out and got a list of landline numbers of people who are eligible to vote, right? So that was how they took this whole list of voters that they couldn't get, and they went, okay, well, I can get landlines, so let me do that. And then they sampled from that. And I don't remember what the sample size on that one, but let's pretend it's just the same. 600, of those landline numbers, right? So essentially, what we're doing is we're just whittling down. We're starting with this big group, the population. We're making that a little smaller with our sampling frame, and then we're getting our little tiny sample. So hopefully you don't have this drawing here. You have more of a like concentric circles thing where each one is a subset of the last, but it's not always guaranteed that way. So that's our sampling frame. We have another definition in this box as well, which is sampling variability. We could all go out and take a sample of Mesa students. I could tell every person, go out and talk to 30 Mesa students, randomly sample them, and ask them whatever it might be. I have no idea. We can come up with something. Whether or not they saw the last Star Wars movie in theaters, whatever it is. And the beauty of a sample is that everybody should have a different result, right? Everybody's going to have a different sample. So no one samples are going to look exactly the same. We're going to have sampling variability. So when you take a sample and you get all your information, that is not like a perfect snapshot, right? It is going to be slightly different than everyone else's little snapshot. But it's hopefully going to look close enough to the population that we can infer something. So that's sampling variability.